All right. Um, let's see. Okay, I think we are good to go. Just check in one last thing. Good. All right. Let's get started with the Hacktoberfest and open source introduction for 2025. Up in full screen. There we go. And we are recording, so that's good. Nice to meet you. I'm Bradley Leonard, or better known in some parts of the internet, Technickel. I am a full stack developer with Tripplelift. Tripplelift is an ad tech company, and I am here to talk to you today about open source and Hacktoberfest. A little bit about myself. I'm a self-described AI Wrangler. Love messing with all the new AI stuff. I am a big 3D printing enthusiast. I got my 3D printer right next to me now, right, waiting to go on the next print. I'm printing some Halloween decorations around this time, which is always fun. And then, more importantly, I have been participating in Hacktoberfest for the last 8 years. So I've been around the block a few times, and I love the kind of event, and I want to talk about what it is today. Uh, So we'll get into the agenda as kind of the what, the who, the why, the how. Very simple, very easy to follow. What is Hacktober? So you might not have heard of Hacktoberfest before. It is what I like to describe as a spooky time to get your hack on. It's happens during the month of October, and it's really a month-long event where you get dedicated time for open source projects. And so we should probably take a step back for a second and say, what is an open source project? Well, an open source project, by I think the definition is more so a project whose source code or the code that makes up the project is open to be seen. Um, that's, I think, the more like traditional definition of open source, whereas I think the definition over time has become open source are projects where the code is open to be seen, but also open to contribute to. Um, and that's where, depending on who you ask, you might get into some different definitions. But I personally take open source projects as projects that you can contribute to, read the code, all the above, because that's what makes them feel the most open. Um, Hacktoberfest, being that event that runs through the month of October, encourages you to go contribute to open source projects. They've been running for 12 years at this point. So I've done 8 of those years. It's been going on for a while now. And each year it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and better. Uh, and why does this event exist? Well, open source really makes a difference. You literally interact with software and projects that only are around because of open source. Think your Linuxes, think your um, different projects. Your computer probably wouldn't be running the same today if it wasn't for these projects that are open and open to contribution. So it's very important that as a ecosystem, open source is contributed to, is continued to be improved, and this is just an excuse to do that. So we got the gist of what Hacktoberfest is. Now let's talk about who is it for. And the answer is really anyone. Um, you might be a maintainer of a project already. Hacktoberfest is a good way to get people to work on your project. All you need to do is slap on a tag on the repo, whether it's a GitHub or GitLab project, and make some issues that some people can work on. And then you have a horde of people that are willing to put their time and effort in just to help you, which is absolutely awesome. You might be a seasoned contributor to open source already. You know exactly what you're doing. You just want to put your efforts towards it. That's where I kind of fall under. I've already done plenty of open source, but Hacktoberfest is a good excuse every year for me to go and contribute to something that I haven't done before, or make something better that for a project that I use often. And then the biggest one is beginners. Hacktoberfest is very beginner friendly. It's not actually that hard to make an open source contribution. We will check that out later in the presentation. So you should be able. My goal by the end of this is to have you walk away and be able to make your own contributions if you haven't already, and get ideas if you have. So the biggest thing is, if you haven't made a pull request before, if you're new to tech in general, open source is a overwhelming but great way to get started. You take it bite by bite, and you will get familiar with the tech ecosystem. Why join Hacktoberfest? Well, a lot of the reasons I just mentioned basically is to dive into open source. Whether you're going to contribute and improve a project or tech or tool that you use on a daily, that can be super satisfying. Giving back during that work is also super fulfilling. It's very healthy to find a purpose to your work, and being able to contribute to something grander is so fulfilling. It really lights a fire under my passion to do that. A big bonus is you get to gain insight for how bigger projects work. Some of these projects are actually quite complicated, and you have the collective mind of hundreds, if not thousands, of people that have worked on it in the past for some of the bigger ones. And so you get to see these bigger trends, bigger patterns, all these kind of things that you might not have been exposed to previously, and that can make you a better developer yourself. And then last thing is to just build cool stuff. Should always be building cool stuff. But other than fulfillment, is there a reason to join Hacktoberfest? Well, yes. There are some rules, and you can't be free stuff, right? So every year in the last few years, Hacktoberfest has been doing what's called Holoman. So it's a kind of platform that gives you these digital badges. In the past, you've been able to basically level up the badges as you make more pull requests, so more changes to these open source codes. It's awesome. They're very cool. They can be displayed, they can be shared, that you have it. It's kind of like a status symbol. Hacktoberfest this year has actually brought back their famous t-shirts. So they, in previous years, have given away t-shirts for making contributions. They're usually of super cool design. This year, they have 10,000 t-shirts available for developers who contribute to worthy repositories. Now, worthy has a few connotations. This means as long as you're not going against the spirit of Hacktoberfest by making spammy PRs for repos that basically are useless to the maintainers, or you're contributing to repos that don't qualify for like this event. So think repos that are just built to write data structures and algorithms, because there's a bajillion of those, or repos that are just adding your name to a list. Those wouldn't be considered worthy. You want to contribute to actual projects, even if they're your own, that's allowed, but it just has to be legitimate projects. And then every t-shirt gain also plants a tree. So that's kind of a cool bonus. I believe at the time that I'm recording, it's halfway through the month of October. So the event's already going on, but there seems to be t-shirts still left. So get started if you're kind of thinking about it, and you might get yourself a t-shirt. Obviously, you're going to level up your development skills. There's no doubt about it. but also you might build your network. There are a global community of people participating in Hacktoberfest. So if you reach out to those people or even the maintainers of the projects that you wish to contribute to, you're going to build your network and kind of grow as a developer. Now the question is, how do you join Hacktoberfest itself? Well, it's easy. You just got to register your account at hacktoberfest.com. And again, participating in Hacktoberfest is just submitting this year 6 high quality PRs to either GitHub or GitLab during the month of October. So the repo must be tagged Hacktoberfest, so you can add tags to a repo as a maintainer. Or if you're searching for one, you find one that's labeled Hacktoberfest. Or if the repo doesn't participate fully in Hacktoberfest, but you still want to contribute, you can have the repo maintainer or the PR reviewer add the tag Hacktoberfest accepted to your PR, and that will also be picked up by Hacktoberfest's PR review bots. It doesn't have to be a code contribution. Documentation, blogs, videos, design all count as long as they are backed by a PR somewhere, just so that Hacktoberfest knows to pick it up. Then it will count. But that doesn't explain how you actually participate. So for reals, yeah, look for a project. There's a few lists here, like the GitHub topic for Hacktoberfest. The second one is the GitLab topic for Hacktoberfest. Those will give you projects specifically that have added that tag, that Hacktoberfest tag to the repo, so that they're looking for Hacktoberfest contributors. The next two, up for grabs and good first issue, these are issues on GitLab and GitHub that have been tagged with like good first issue or I need help, which is the up for grabs one. Those are basically saying these are probably better for the people that who haven't done any work in our repo. They might be a lower level of difficulty, they might be smaller tasks, but they're a good jumping off on those projects. You can go to the Hacktoberfest projects for Sell app, which is just basically I believe it's the GitHub topic, but in a website form. Ask AI. There's a bunch of projects that are open source that AI can probably have a conversation with you for. So maybe you won't say to the AI, I want to work on something that is in the realm of 3D printing. It will probably spit out a bunch of projects that have 3D printing involved in them. And then you can go look to see if they have open source code that you can contribute to. It's as easy as that. Or you can pull from your own inspiration from work or browsing. I know that we use a lot of tools at Triple that are open source and major. There's a few ones like AWS CDK, where you can go and look at the source code. It's our infrastructure as code deployment. And I could put it in a PR if I want it, which is awesome. Super exciting. But again, it doesn't really help me get started. So let's get into the nitty gritty. So actually the steps of contributing to open source. The first step is to find an issue and communicate. So sure, you can make a change for a problem you're experiencing yourself, but likely most of your contributions for open source will be problems that other people have. Someone will have made an issue. As you can see on the left there, my project Low Poly is just a React-based website that takes advantage of WASM to generate digital art. I made a bunch of issues and I tagged them. People can grab them if they want, because it's just not something I've had time to work on myself. But most projects ask that you communicate that your intent to grab an issue, because you don't want to run into the situation where you are working on something and someone beats you to the punch, or it's not actually something that the project is looking to implement because it doesn't align with their path. So communicating your intent to take a issue and actually fleshing out the issue sometimes, because not all the issues are fully fleshed out ideas, might be something you need to do before you actually get to code. But when that's all figured out, you can fork the repo. So there is a little fork button at the top of most repos that lets you make a copy of that repo. So that's exactly what a fork is it's a diversion from the original source code that you could do anything to, and it won't matter because it doesn't screw up the original project. So you could make an absolute mess and nothing will happen, which is awesome. It gives a low stakes kind of environment where you can mess around and screw up, and that's fine. But in order to do that, you have to clone the repo using Git. So Git is a kind of version control software. It's been around forever. It is important to learn as a developer how to use Git. And we won't go over that today exactly, but there are plenty of resources to learn how to use Git. The biggest thing here is to clone the repo that you just forked. So not the original repo, but the repo that you fork so that you don't run into problems. But I'll show that during a little demo. And now the fun part is making the changes. What those changes can be, it could be anything. Again, based on the issue that you probably picked up, or based on the changes that you want to make the project better. That's how that's the work you're going to be doing. It's going to be overwhelming. A lot of projects are hard to get started on just because you're not familiar with the architecture, you're not familiar with how to set up your environment. Usually the project itself will tell you how to do that, but you might have to do some sleuthing in the code to figure out exactly what you're doing. That's fine. This stuff takes time sometimes, and you just gotta take it one step at a time, and then suddenly, eventually, at one point, the whole picture will click, and you'll be like, oh, that's why they're doing this. That's how we do this. And your changes can start being made. When you have your changes, you're going to stage, commit, and push them using Git. Again, this isn't going to be a huge tutorial on how to use Git. There's a free code camp tutorial on the basics of Git in under 10 minutes. Awesome little tutorial, but it'll walk you through how to do the staging. So telling I'm telling Git that I want to use these files specifically, committing, actually saying, okay, I'm going to lock in these changes, and then pushing to remote, which is just saying send them off to my version of the fork to lead into step 6, which is making the pull request. So basically, you're going to make your changes locally, push them to the internet, and then that's last step is basically taking the changes in that isolated fork that you made and bringing them into the actual project through a pull request. And what a pull request is basically asking permission to put your code into the original project. We'll go over all this in a second. So you got the basic gist of how to make a change. What are some examples? And I've been doing this for 8 years, so I have a few. Last year or year before, I contributed some bit to a website called Syntax FM. It's actually a podcast you can go listen to. Absolutely great podcast. But my code change was adding episode metadata after they made an all call to help them out with some data changes, which is awesome. So very low stakes, very not technically hard, but very helpful for the crew of Syntax. One more closer to my hobbies, I'm a big fan of 3D and AR web in general. But Google has a model viewer web component, which is just an easy way to do 3D and AR on the web. I made two contributions to that one. So I improved their Open Graph metadata kind of link preview, which is the kind of little links that, or the all the extra rich stuff that you get when you paste a link into some platforms. You get like sometimes a picture, you get a nice little title, description. Uh, so I made some improvements there, and then I improved some accessibility around the internet. I've done stuff with VS Code. So with VS Code, which is a coding IDE, I basically updated this VS Code extensions or VS Code Pets extension. And it's a very silly little extension that gives you a little kind of Tamagotchi, if anybody remembers those, uh, to play with. So you can have a little interactive cat or different animals. My contributions there were pet names. I did some code refactoring just to make it easier to maintain the project. And I added pet name tags actually, because you can name your pet, but you can't actually see their name. That one was not merged. Not everything you will do in open source gets merged, and that's all right. I did gain the experience of making changes in a VS Code extension, and that's the biggest thing I got out of that, which is awesome. Good for my skills, even if my code doesn't make it to the end goal. I've done stuff with React XR, which is a library to make augmented reality and virtual reality easier to do in React. And I actually added AR hit testing, which is a very big part of augmented reality. So that was a more challenging open source contribution, but a very fulfilling one when it was done and accepted. There's ones like VS Code Twitch Highlighter. So this is a project that lets you have your Twitch chat, which is a live streaming platform. The chat on that platform can highlight lines of code in your VS Code to either help you code, mess with you, whatever you really want. I made changes there to migrate their testing and their linting, with the testing getting merged, but the linting not getting merged. Moving on to ones that the projects that have been archived. So Shuttle Music Player was an old Android music player that has since been archived. Basically, the project's no longer being maintained or continued, and that's fine. It was a very cool project when I contributed to it, but music has gotten into a different landscape these days, so it's not as needed anymore. So my contributions there was doing some basically interaction with the icon visibility, and then a very cool one that I didn't get merged is Shake the Shuffle. And that one didn't get merged because I just never fully cleaned up the PR and stuff, but you could shake the phone and you shuffle to the next song. It was super cool. So I got to work with accelerometers and stuff. And then finally, I've made contributions to my own open source. So Low Poly is the project I talked about before. It's basically just like an art project. I'm a very big fan of the technical side, meaning the artistic side of my work. So this was a good project to build for me for just my own purposes. And it uses WebAssembly or WASM to generate digital art. So it's everything from using computer vision to basically remove the background, and then using the basically outline of that object to make a little kind of background. And I am the maintainer for that one. So I've contributed to open source by open sourcing my own code, which feels good. You can go contribute to this project if you want yourself. So that leads us to the actual contribution to walk through. So it's all good to have seen those slides that I went through earlier, talking about how you can basically go make a go fork a repo, make a PR, but those were just pictures. It's not easy to always translate that to what you're actually going to do. So we're going to walk through it this year. So here is my personal GitHub. I'm going to just basically show you how to find a project. You can come over to the drop down and press explore. These will give you projects that you kind of can look through. Whether you're exploring just random projects, certain projects by topic, basically there's the group projects by topic that you can be interested in. So maybe I was interested in like 3D printing, or that's how you find the topic of Hacktoberfest. So all these topics are specifically participating in Hacktoberfest. You can go contribute to them, get your PRs to count towards Hacktoberfest. And you can see there is 100,000 repos. That is 100,000 or 150,000. That is a lot of projects that you can choose from. And so basically, you just got to whittle down to which projects you're interested in, which issues and changes that you think you're capable of making. For example, you can also search just in the search bar here. So I'm a big fan of CNC, and I want the topic of G code. So CNC happens to be just it's like 3D printing, where instead of depositing material to make something, you're removing material. So like I like to say a computer controlled drill. This repo isn't participating in Hacktoberfest, but it is open source. I can go read the source code. I can go make changes to the source code, and I've already done my Hacktoberfest for the year, so I don't have to worry about these PRs counting for Hacktoberfest, but I can ask them, hey, could you label my PR Hacktoberfest accepted if I wanted to count for Hacktoberfest? In this case, I don't need to do anything with Hacktoberfest specifically, so we're going to walk through making a open source change to GSender, the CNC-based software, without even worrying about Hacktoberfest. So the first thing I do is I'm going to find an issue. There are 71 in this repo, so there's 71 things that you could do possibly. There's a lot of different avenues you can go down. I specifically found one that says it's a feature that they're asking for configurable macro pop-up toast display time. And what that means is in the software, you have basically the ability to make a macro or like a repeatable piece of action that pops up a toast every time you confirm it or whatever. A toast is basically just a little notification, right hand corner usually. They are saying basically with their issue that the toast popping up actually gets in the way of doing macros because it popped up right over the macros every single time. And they want to move faster and not have to worry about that notification. So their feature request is basically making show time configurable, which means also the stretch goal of just kind of making it so that the toast can be shown for a configurable amount of time or no time at all. So we're going to start following our kind of steps to contributing to open source, and the first step is to communicate. So I'm basically going to say, hey, I would love to work on this issue. I'll have a PR up shortly. Basically, the crux of the problem is very simple to understand. I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm making changes to their posting system so that the time that is displayed is configurable, and that it's a user changeable time. So I don't really need to gather more information. I don't really need to say anything other than I'm planning to work on this. Keep an eye out for my PR. So that's the first step. Then we come back and fork the repo so that we have our own copy that we can mess up. As you can see, I've already forked it. So usually your user will be chosen. It's going to make a repository under your user called gsender or whatever you name it that has the code that is in this original project. I'm going to copy the master branch, and usually I press create fork, but in my case, I don't need to because I've already forked the repo. So if I go to my repos, you'll see that I have a gsender repo under my user that's forked from the original gsender repo and ready to do whatever I want to, which is awesome. What we need to do then is clone the repos. So you can come to this little code tab, grab the URL basically for HTTPS, and I'm going to assume that you already have Git installed on your machine, but you'll have to open up a terminal, assuming Git is installed, git clone, and then the URL that you just copied. So the biggest thing here is to make sure that the URL that you have is your username / the project. Because if it's CNC Labs or whatever the original project count / project, that means that you're taking the project, you're going to get the code and the Git set up for the original project, which is not what you want. You want your version of the project so that you don't, when you make your changes, that it doesn't affect upstream. Not that usually you will be able to, because the upstream project, the original, will usually have permission blocking so that you can't just push whatever you want to their project willy-nilly. You have to go through this pull request process. Your project, however, because you are the owning user of it, usually lets you just push straight to the project, which makes it easier to make your changes. So I've already cloned this, so I don't even need to run this, but usually you run this. And then I will just cd into my gsender folder that it will pull in. I'm going to open this up in VS Code right now. And here we are. So this is the source code for that CNC control program for me to change however I want. The hardest part about here now is getting up and running. So the biggest things to note are 3 things. So usually software has a license. That means that this is when you make changes to the software, these are the legal terms that your changes fall under. Usually open source projects are pretty permissive. Like this one has a GNU general or new general public license, which means it's what they call a copy left. So any changes that you make to this software, you kind of have to include the same type of license. And that license states that this is kind of open code. It's open for modification, open for use, open for a bunch of things. And there's different types of licenses. So you just got to be aware that some licenses are more permissive than others and tell you exactly what you can and can't do with the code. The next is sometimes there's a contributing.md file where they explain how to basically make contributions to the project. Usually, sometimes they might have you sign a basically release that says any contributions I make to the project are good for the project and like you can have at her. Sometimes it's just rules that basically say don't harass the maintainers, don't be mean, blah, blah, blah. It depends on per project, but usually it's good to have a read through that. And then last thing is to read the README. So README is generally where your information about the project is. It might have installation instructions. It might have, like this one has download instructions. This project specifically doesn't have instructions on how to set up your environment for development. They are getting better. They've actually have APR open in one of their other repos that basically walks you through how to compile gSender for development. And so I did all this follow up in the background because it's a little bit lengthy, but the setup in your environment will be different depending on what project you're looking at. No one project is set up the same. Sometimes you'll have to, like in these instructions, if you're doing Windows, you have to install Node.js, and then you have to enable Yarn, and then you have to enable Python and other tools, and then you install dependencies. Finally, at this step, you get to actually run the project. So some setups can be quite lengthy. Some setups might be one command. It really depends, and it just involves either talking to the maintainers of the project, already knowing what you're doing with the technologies that they're using, or looking at documentation that they've written to how to get up and running. So in my case, I looked at the documentation, so we can go back in the code and basically use what we have here. So I can get rid of that. And now that we are in the project, we got our source code, we can actually start making changes and see the change. So I'm going to run the dev server so that I can actually see the changes we're making. Again, all part of the setup that you probably had to go through. And then when that is up, we can start making changes. So the change that I'm just going to show you today is super simple. It will just involve changing basically the text on one button. Don't follow my exact. Changing the text on one button, unless asked for, is not what you want to do. You want to actually contribute your own changes. So I'm just doing this as an example, but we're just going to change connect to CNC to connect to hello world. So usually I just do, I would search for something that helps me find the code. So specifically the text connect to CNC will pop up the exact spot that I want to be in, this index.txt file. You might need to set breakpoints. You might need to just manually look through the code. Finding the spot where you make the change is one of the harder parts of this step. And it takes time. Knowing all the places to make the change is also a problem. But that's part of the fun of open source. You get to bang your head against the problem until you figure it out. So instead of connect to CNC, we'll say connect to a controller, which is not as good as a thing, but you can see that because I'm running the development server, those changes get picked up automatically through hot module reloading, and my changes are already here. So now instead of saying connect to a CNC, saying connect to a controller. That is super easy. Now we can actually, now that we know that our changes are being picked up, we can actually tackle that original ask from, we go back from the issue, which is saying, I want a notification system for our configurable notification, which I don't remember where exactly it was. Not a problem. There it is. I remember exactly what we're doing. Oh, look, someone's the original poster. So the person that asked for the feature is hearted my message because they're very happy that I'm working on it. So I already got that kind of feedback, which is awesome. So I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do it, because it was actually more significant of a change. So if we look up the toast, if I look up the file for toast, there's actually a whole section in the library where there's a bunch of toast stuff. I had to make changes to the index file where they have kind of this middleware that saves notifications to a store before sending it. So my idea was, what if we also use that middleware to kind of take in the user settings to check through what is set or use the original duration. And then on top of that, I had to make changes to user settings, which is, no, it's menu settings. Menu settings or select settings. I don't remember the file exactly, but there was different parts of the code that I had to go change. All part of the process. It took me a few hours to figure it out, but in the end, I was able to figure out where I needed to make the changes to do the things that when I've got the changes. So in our case, we're going to pretend to stage commit and push the changes that I made to this text. You should not be doing the same thing I'm doing. You should be making your own changes, doing your own issue or feature or bug fix or whatever it is, and following your own path. But I'm just going to show you the general process you should. So usually we want to stage this. So I said before that there was a few commands, git commands that you could do. Because I'm in VS Code, I don't need to do those under the terminal. I can just do the visual way. So this plus button adds the file to my stage commits. I'm going to give it a message, basically say, give it something descriptive, change the text for the connection button to something that makes me feel better. Obviously, you want something descriptive for the problem that you're trying to solve. You might make multiple commits. It might not, all the changes might not happen in one go, but usually you want small groups of changes so that it makes it easier on the maintainer when they're doing their work. Big PRs are really hard to review. So the smaller your changes, the smaller groups of changes makes it easier for everyone. So you can even see in this diff that I changed the, text here. So I'm ready to commit my changes, which is step 2 there. So I'm going to press the commit button. And then the final would be to push, which would be to sync my changes. I'm not going to do that because I've already made the changes to my repo. So if I go to my repo again, gsender, you can see that I'm one commit ahead of that original fork. So I'm going to open a pull request. You can see all the different changes I made. So it was 4 or 5 files, not too crazy, but not the simplest change in the world. I tested all the changes. So basically I leave a descriptive pull requests basically saying this PR updates the toast notifications to be user configurable. And I'm going to describe that value. I'm going to describe that a value of 0 is keeps durations as they are. Value of -1. What's the value of -1? Sets the toast as permanent until the user manually dismisses them. And so I'm just writing out basically the gist of my PR. Value of -2 disables toasts all together. And that's just basically describing what the code I wrote does. And then the biggest thing is to say these changes close number 370 or 731. And basically that will link that issue to the changes that I made. Please let me know if you would like any tweaks or changes, because I might not have hit the mark exactly on the first go. So I'm gonna let them have full reign of telling me like what changes I might need to make. They might make the feature made differently. And I'm just going to update the title to be a little bit more descriptive for user configurable toastration. And I make my PR. So you've just watched me make a PR from my changes on my fork to the gsender repo in real time. Yes, I did a lot of the work for finding the repo on my own time and making the changes, but the actual process for contributing is short. It's not that hard. So the biggest parts is finding the project to contribute to and actually making changes, making sure that they work, making sure that you're not breaking other things. And that's it. That takes us to the end of our presentation. You've watched me contribute to open source. I hope that you get to go contribute yourself, participate in Hacktoberfest if you'd like, get some prizes or some rewards if you'd like. You can learn more at hacktoberfest.com. That's their official website. And if you want to talk to me at all, I can be reached at technickel.dev or Bradley at technickel.dev. And I think I'll check if there's any questions, but I don't think we have any. So that's all. Have a good one.